yes, for prosperity.
How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. Are you talking to me or you or someone else?
Yes, I am. Of course, I'm talking to you. How are you?
I'm blessed, thank you.
Amen. Amen.
All right, Shelley Simpson will be joining us now, and Melissa Lynch. All right.
Oh, Melissa, okay, Melissa is one of the speakers, of course.
Hello, Shelley Simpson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa.
Hello, Melissa. How are you, Melissa?
Hello. Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
Okay. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Rob. Hello, Dr. George.
How are you, Melissa? You look fabulous.
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you all today?
We're doing fine. And this is Ms. Chinyere Obina Unchekwe, the moderator.
Meet you. Great to meet you, Melissa.
And
nice to meet you.
Anne is joining us from England.
Reverend Annie.
Annie, Dr. Pastor Annie, yeah, from London, England.
Hi, Annie.
Shirley, are you in New York City?
I am in New York City on the Upper West Side, and I am a friend of Corey's.
Oh, Corey, okay, welcome.
Corey. Okay.
Thank you.
Corey Bearak.
Yes.
Okay, great. He's a great guy, you know.
He certainly is.
20 years. Yeah.
We're in Gotham Business Networking together.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. Is that like a BNI or something?
Similar. And if you'd like to visit, let me know, and I'll be happy to send you the information. You can check it out. Corey can tell you all about it. He's been in a little longer than I have.
Oh, great. You know, and I can invite you to my Rotary Club.
Oh.
I belong to the
Izuchukwu, I'm sorry to interrupt you guys. Dr. Izuchukwu just joined us.
Oh, okay.
We lost him again.
Okay, yeah, I can see him.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Dr. Izuchukwu.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Nice to see
okay.
you.
So we have Rob Merella, the Communication Director for FSCDI.
Hi.
Melissa Lynch.
Hello, Dr. Masci. Good to
Hi.
see you.
Oh, Dr. Masci is here too.
He's here with us,
Hi.
yes.
Okay, great, great. So, maybe in the next 5 minutes or so, we'll see. We're expecting Corey Bearak to join us. Hello, Dr. Masci.
Hi,
Hello.
Hey, Dr. Masci, nice to see you again.
nice to see
How are
you.
Yeah.
I had to move out of my office because they're drilling in there and I couldn't hear myself think. So
Oh, okay.
I'm surrounded by boxes in here.
Oh, okay, no problem, you know. Yes, yes.
Yes, Corey. Yeah, all right. We have people filing on right now. We have Corey's just joining and
Oh, Corey.
Sandy.
Oh, Sandy Heckler from the United Nations.
Well, New York time, good afternoon from Young Global Leadership Foundation. I'm the special representative and now the co-main representative to the United Nations, and I am the USA representative as well.
Hello, Sandy.
Welcome, Sandy.
You are welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to mute now. I have construction outside.
Okay. I think it's 12 o'clock. Everybody's here that should be here, right?
Oh, Corey?
That's correct.
Yeah, Corey, yes.
Corey, yeah.
One more person.
As soon as he joins, we can start, you know. Rob, do we have anything from our past pictures, anything that we can look at as we wait?
Well, I would invite everyone to the FSCDI.org website. You can see the past how long have we been around, Dr. George? 2 years or so, 3 years?
2 going to 3 years.
Where you can see a lot of the types of events and things that Dr. George has put together. We try and raise money for students around the beginning of the school year and Christmas, and we've sent some money to some villages in Africa, in Nigeria specifically. And our latest sort of project is getting together people to discuss how COVID has changed the world, and connecting people from across the world really to discuss what's new and what's happening. And with that, I have Alexander is joining. Why don't I start with the kind of the mission statement of FSCDI, which stands for the Foundation for Sustainable Community Development Initiative. It's a 5013 nonprofit based in New York City, whose vision is to identify needy communities within the United States and Africa who are committed to developing, participating, and sustaining economic, educational, and wellness initiatives. And Dr. George, should we just get started? Maybe I can make the first introduction and then...
Yes. Okay, so let's do that.
Okay, so we're lucky to have Chinira, who is the executive director of a cable television show called Africa on the Rise. And she is the author of a series of books whose the name of the book I don't see right now, but maybe she can tell you. A Taste of the Heart? A taste? Yeah, all right. All right, Chinira, why don't you take it away from here?
Thank you so much, Mr. Morelli, for such a wonderful introduction. Welcome to everybody here on this show. Again, my name is Obina Onwuchekwa, and I'm the author of the book series Dictates of the Heart, as well as the executive director of the cable TV show Africa on the Rise. I just want to welcome you all to this very, very crucial event. We are going to be tackling today the biggest challenge that has ever faced humanity. It seems like when we stepped into the year 2020, we stepped right into the most terrifying era for humanity, something that not even the most talented horror movie producer could have envisaged. The world came to a standstill as news of the outbreak of the novel coronavirus circulated around the globe, quickly followed by the grim reality of this new epidemic that quickly became classified as a worldwide pandemic. From different parts of the globe, we watched helplessly as millions of people contracted this horrific disease and millions perished from it. The rush has continued for the production of a vaccine or a treatment module to combat this threat. Throughout it all, one thing has remained abundantly clear, and that is that life will never be the same again. Welcome to our new normal. So that's my introduction to this show. Is Mr. Bearak here with us?
Mr. Corey Bearak?
Yes.
Yeah, Corey is here. Corey?
Beautiful. Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to now start, right? So, so as this pandemic rages on, people have learned, of course, to adjust to it. From the way we interact with each other, everything has changed. The way we take care of ourselves. So with us today, as we already know, is a panel of experts who will help us to make sense of it all. So our first guest is Dr. Joseph R. Masci. He's an MD FACP, Chairman of Global Health at Elmhurst Hospital Center. He's also a professor of medicine and infectious disease, as well as environmental medicine and public health. Dr. Masci, thank you so much and welcome to our panel. Could you please introduce yourself to us?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I'm Joe Masci. I'm Chairman of Global Health at Elmhurst Hospital, as was said. I'm on the faculty at Mount Sinai. My interest has been in infectious diseases, both in New York and in other parts of the world. We've had a project in Ethiopia and a project in Russia looking at HIV. And for the last few months, of course, we've been almost completely focused on COVID and what it's meant locally and nationally. Elmhurst Hospital, as you all know, I think, was hit particularly hard with COVID. And right now we're trying to figure out services to provide to people who were successfully discharged or never actually had to come to the hospital in the first place, as we are getting increasingly aware that there are long-term consequences of COVID among those people who do survive, and we're trying to understand them better and provide appropriate care for them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Masci. Our next guest is Dr. John Izuchukwu. He's the president and CEO of Core Devices, Inc. Dr. Izuchukwu is an industrial and structural engineer whose expertise spans the development of medical and electronic equipment and devices that are used in hospital settings for diagnosis and treatment of diseases. Dr. Izuchukwu, it's our pleasure to have you here today. Welcome to our forum. Please introduce yourself to us.
Thank you. She did a nice job introducing me, of course. My background is industrial and mechanical engineering. So I have 30 years in the industry, developing medical devices from pulse oximeters to CPAP and BiPAP machines to surgical instruments. I used to run research and development for Johnson & Johnson.
I'm in front of it. Can you mute your phones, please, so that we can, it will not be interfering, so we can hear from Dr. Izuchukwu. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
go ahead, sir.
Okay. So as I was saying, I ran research and development for Johnson & Johnson, developing surgical devices for endoscopic and laparoscopic surgery. I moved to Missouri about 20 years ago now, and ran global research and development for a company called Mallinckrodt, now Covidian, Icahn, developing mechanical ventilators, BiPAP machines, and so forth, and oxygen generation equipment, and left them and joined Icahn Corporation as the VP of Device Engineering. While we lament what is going on in Africa, I see an opportunity for us to contribute. And I am currently working in conjunction with the University of Jos to develop a portable emergency care ventilator that can be deployed not only in Nigeria, but all of Africa. And I'm happy to report that since we began this journey, a lot of traction has been gained. We meet twice a week on this matter. So I'll let the other person take over. I hope I haven't spoken too much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Izuchukwu, for such great jobs. So, our next guest is Mr. Corey Bearak. He's an attorney at law. Mr. Bearak provides strategic political counsel on public policy and government affairs for public officials, government agencies, community agencies, individuals, and political candidates. Thank you so much, Mr. Bearak, and welcome to this forum. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very happy to participate. I've known George a long time, and he invited me to participate, and I'm thankful to him. I had been in government for well over 2 decades, working on issues mostly at the state and city level. Most of the work was in the justice, environmental, and fiscal budget spheres. And since I left government in the spring of 2003, I've been mostly advising public officials, people who want to get into public office, labor unions, coalitions around an issue, business groups on public policy issues, getting things done from government and quasi-government entities, and hoping to help them make a difference, you know, by affecting change or reforms as needed. And it's something I enjoy doing because it was similar, you know, strategically to what I was doing while I was in government.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bearak, for such an important job. Our next guest is Ms. Melissa Lynch. She's a nutritionist and an independent consultant at Urban Queens. We all know how important nutrition, taking care of your body, is in combating illnesses and diseases. Welcome to this forum, Ms. Lynch. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here and share with you all. I'm Melissa Lynch, independent consultant and district manager with Arbonne International. I live in Astoria, Queens. Is it possible, sorry everybody, is it possible to mute everyone. Hearing some background, thank you. Okay, thank you. So, independent consultant and district manager with Arbonne International. Arbonne is a company that has been around since 1980. We were founded by Peter Mork, who set out to develop and produce and market skincare and related products that are unparalleled in quality, purity, safety, and beneficial results. We follow a very strict ingredient policy with our products, so we focus on nutrition. We also offer skincare, body care, hair care, and makeup products. We believe in the connection between a healthy mind, a strong body, and more beautiful skin. And we feel that we are uniquely positioned in a place to lead the global revolution for wellness by providing these safe and healthy products. We empower people to be the best we can be, and we focus on holistic results. So healthy living from the inside out. We deliver results, and we support an overall sustainable, healthy lifestyle. I live in Astoria, Queens, and we operate in the United States. We're also in Canada, UK, Poland, New Zealand, Australia, and we are beginning to expand all over the world. So thank you very much for being here. I look forward to sharing more.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lynch. Also with us is the CEO of FSCDI Inc., Dr. George Onuorah, who will tell us a little bit about the organization and why we're here today.
Thank you, thank you. It's really a pleasure to have everyone assembled this afternoon to share, discuss, and hopefully get inspired by the information that's gonna be passed along. My name is Dr. George Onuorah, and actually the vision of this organization is simply a way to connect communities that are underserved, that are marginalized, that are challenged by the lack of economic resources, both here in Corona, Queens, as well as in the remote villages in Africa where I come from. I'm not going to really go into the details as Mr. Morella, our communication director, has enunciated. Our organization mission is to be able to impact life on a global level, you know, doing the basic things such as sending in hospital supplies, as we've just done through the donations from Elmhurst Hospital. That's actually the connection that I have with Dr. Masci and Mr. George Icahn, who is also here. George Icahn, you're welcome. You know, so we are just about helping people. I just want to make this short and say that John F. Kennedy, during his inaugural address, when he took office, challenged Americans and indeed the world. He says, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So as since we live in this global community, each one of us can reach out and do our very best, no matter how small it is, to impact one life. Everyone reach one. With that, we can make this world a better place, and indeed, all life matters. So with that said, I would like to revert back to Ms. Chinyere Obinna, but then I want to also acknowledge the presence of some of our executive board members. I can see Dr. Chinweani, who is also in charge of our medical VP and medical sciences. And then Mr. Alexander Litvinov, also here. And then of course, our great communication director, Mr. Rob Merello, as well as a few others that I cannot see. So without further ado, I just want us to get in this and see what kind of information is shared. I thank everyone for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. George Onuorah. Thank you everybody for being a part of it. Thank you to our panel of guests, also the people that are viewing with us. Thank you so much. We welcome you to this very, very important and crucial event. We'll open up the floor with our medical expert, Dr. Masci. And thank you so much for the wonderful work that you're doing at Elmhurst Hospital. So from the early days of the pandemic, New York City, of course, was hardest hit, and your hospital, Elmhurst Hospital, was the epicenter of this terrifying disease. And in the midst of it all, you have helped to steer your medical team at that hospital towards saving lives. So Dr. Masci, what is the most important thing right now that people need to know about this virus?
Well, I think what I had mentioned earlier, let me just expand on that a little bit. The problems and complications that COVID causes, even after someone is successfully discharged from the hospital, or even if they never even had to come to the hospital, those are getting increasingly, coming increasingly to our attention. I was on the phone last week with the doctor who runs the large hospital in Italy that was hit particularly hard. And they're doing what we're doing. They're looking at all of their patients who had abnormal chest x-rays or who had heart conditions that developed during COVID to see whether those are permanent problems for them or whether they're going to go away as the COVID goes away. They don't have the answer yet, but they found that 50% of their patients had either heart disease or lung disease that was caused by COVID at the time they were discharged from the hospital, even after they had recovered from the urgent conditions. And that makes me very concerned because I think there were so many people, particularly in New York, who had COVID. Hundreds of thousands of people had it. And many of them not only didn't come to the hospital, many of them did not have medical attention, maybe didn't even require medical attention. What are we going to see now over the next few years in terms of COVID problems? So we're trying to sort that out right now. We are looking at patients at Elmhurst who had severe lung problems and were discharged with continued severe lung problems. Now, our surge ended back in May. So we've had several months now to organize this kind of follow-up study. And hopefully we'll be able to identify some issues quickly. Number one, what I'm hoping is that most or even all of these patients will steadily recover from their problem. But if we see what they're seeing in Italy, where the epidemic started about a month before it started here, I'm concerned that we may see a substantial number of people who have ongoing heart and lung problems after COVID. There are other conditions as well that COVID causes, kidney problems, liver problems, and we're going to follow those out as well. We're also working with the Gates Foundation at Elmhurst, looking at rapid turnaround drug trials where we're going to look at, to try to get the answer to things that could not be answered in the middle of a huge number of patients arriving quickly. The tendency back then was to reach for anything that might work and to try it because patients were really, really very, very sick. So we did not have the luxury of creating controlled trials with placebos, et cetera. So now we're going to look at people who have recovered or who are not that sick to see if various treatments do benefit them. And that could be part of a treatment plan going forward if this outbreak continues to surge across the country. So the first one we're looking at is anticoagulation. People had a lot of problems with blood clots, thrombosis, sometimes quite unexpectedly in the middle of COVID. It causes that problem. And we want to see, A, does everybody belong on an anticoagulant drug because of that? Yes or no? And B, how long does the anticoagulant drug have to be continued? Should they be on lifelong anticoagulation or can it be stopped after a few months? So I could go on and on. I don't want to take up too much time, but those are the types of questions that we're now going to be able to address in a traditional scientific way that we couldn't during the depths of the epidemic in New York.
Thank you so much for that very important information, Dr. Masci. I have another question for you. And it appears, I mean, we rely on what we hear over the news about this disease, but it appears that over time, the trajectory of this disease has changed. When news of the COVID-19 illness first hit the world, the entire universe seemed to be littered with casualties of COVID-19, with the death toll mounting, accelerating on a daily basis. However, it appears that the disease is not claiming as many lives as before. I mean, there's been a lot of theories and hypotheses. People are, theorizing different things, that it has evolved, that people have become more exposed to it, that the impact has weakened as more people become exposed to it. We've heard about herd immunity. We also hear other theories that the summer month, because right now we're in the summer, that the summer.
Can't hear you.
Shanira?
She's muted.
Unmute. You're muted. Unmute.
Excuse me, Shanira, you were muted there for about 10 seconds.
Okay. So do you want me to start afresh? I didn't know
Can
I was muted. I'm sorry.
I can hear you now. Can everyone else hear Shanira?
Yes.
Okay,
Do you want
Shanira.
me to ask to start afresh, or did you hear me?
We heard about the. I hear her. Most people hear her. Raise your hand if you don't hear her.
Okay. Okay, so the question is for you, Dr. Joseph Masci. Can you please shed some light on that?
Okay, I'm not sure I did hear the whole question, but I think what we're, we have to always keep in mind that we are still only 6 months into this brand new disease.
Yes.
So drawing any firm conclusions about whether things are getting better or things are stabilizing or things are getting worse is next to impossible. There are some countries in the world that have been successful because of fairly strict lockdowns. We saw this in Western Europe. What will happen as those lockdowns are steadily lifted, we'll have to wait and see. Africa is a very interesting dilemma. We've talked about this before with this group, with some people in this group. In Africa, it was certainly expected that this would have caused the same level of outbreak that it has caused in Asia, North America, and South America, but it hasn't. There are certain countries that have been very, very heavily hit by it, particularly the countries of Northern Africa and South Africa. But even with the very large cities in Africa, we have not seen the sort of proportional level of outbreak there, thank goodness. Exactly why that is not known yet. Most African countries shut off travel very quickly and have continued to be on a very, very firm lockdown. And that may be the answer. I think we may learn something about resistance to this virus by looking at what's happened in Africa. There are obviously many different subpopulations in Africa, but it seems to be almost a geographical relative resistance to it. We just have to understand that better. But again, I always have to remind myself that we're only 5 or 6 months into this. And whatever we think is a lesson today may turn out to have been the wrong lesson a year from now. So we have to keep a careful eye on this. And as we understand the virus better, as testing is becoming more and more user-friendly, we may be able to get more statistics, more denominator data for Africa and other parts of the world that have been relatively spared. But we don't know the answer to that yet. So that's a major area that needs to be investigated. One problem right now with doing international research is, of course, many international research projects are sort of on lockdown because of the inability of people to travel to the countries to do the research with them. So I think we have to look at the data that's being collected by investigators in countries all over the world and try to make some sense out of it. And hopefully the politics will move out of this relatively quickly now, and we can really make some actual conclusions. What we would want to know is, are people who are in relatively spared countries getting the infection but not getting sick? So do they have antibody evidence that they've had the infection? Or are they not being exposed to the infection? Or are they completely resistant to the infection? We don't know the answers to that. We know that the numbers in African countries are very believable now because we saw what happened with Ebola in West Africa. There was never a question that they were being struck by an enormous outbreak there. We're not seeing anything like that right now with COVID in Africa. So there's some questions, and at least it's, for the time being, it looks like very, very good news in terms of how this infection is spreading.
Thank you so much, Dr. Masci. There seems to be so many variables about this disease. So just continue to keep an eye on it. So Ms. Lynch, a lot of people have come up with different nutritional plans, supplements to fortify their immune system. And with the kind of work that you do, can you please help us to cut through the clutter and identify what a person can do to make their body stronger?
Absolutely. So the nutrition program that Arbonne offers, it's called our 30 Days to Healthy Living program. And yes, there are a lot of different programs out there. There are a lot of different concepts and ideas about what is right. And what I love about our program is it helps support a balanced gut, and it helps people learn how to eat more intuitively. So that means everybody responds to food differently. We're all different human beings. So what we really do is we help you learn how to identify how food makes you feel. And then you have the information to fuel yourself how you want to moving forward and make sort of sustainable lifestyle changes. So in general, things that most people can agree on is that it's best to drink water and to make sure that we're hydrated. It is best to make sure we're getting fresh fruits and vegetables. All right, I see you. I'm also drinking water. Also to avoid a lot of processed foods when possible. Part of Arbonne's vision and mission is to have transparency as far as ingredients in our skincare and our makeup and in our nutrition products that we offer, and informing people and educating them on how to read their labels. There are so many hidden ingredients in things that people consume every day, especially the standard American diet. So avoiding artificial sweeteners, avoiding artificial things like sucralose and aspartame, and for a period of time, avoiding things that are common in our diet, foods that have a lot of salt and a lot of preservatives, and just identifying how that makes you feel. So really it's about supporting your gut health, drinking water, getting fiber, getting fresh fruits and vegetables, eating a variety of foods, including whole grains, if you are a person who consumes meat, lean protein, if you are not, getting enough protein, healthy fats, that there's no one right way, but learning how to fuel yourself, making sure you're eating enough and consistently so that it will contribute to not just your overall health, but your energy levels. Your gut health contributes to your immune system. It contributes to your mood and your serotonin levels. So really what we fuel ourselves with is vital.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lynch. Another question for you, which it could also be for Dr. Masci, is that we all know that from the inception, from the time this virus hit the world, the internet is littered, filled with advice on what to eat, what to inhale. They give there's advice about lemon, onions, ginger, garlic, inhaling steam, inhaling different herbs, and it's very confusing. And a lot of people have, some people swear by it. Some people say, some medical personnel say it hurts you. Can somebody please help us to cut through the clutter about all of this? Because people are doing different things to try to save themselves or to try to, keep their body healthy and fight this thing off.
I will speak first and then I will pass the ball, but I am going to say that I think, especially as this is so new, it would be inappropriate to, I am not in a position to give medical advice as far as what can prevent or cure the coronavirus. I think in general, it's just best to do what we can to keep ourselves as healthy as possible. I do think there is something to be said for, also taking care of your mental health and stress levels. So if there's something in your routine that helps keep you feeling positive, whether that's having herbal teas or supplements, great. I would also say that, yes, the internet is large and everyone is an expert. So be very mindful when you're consuming the information and understanding where it's coming from and default to the experts. Look at what the CDC is saying, look at what the World Health Organization is saying. And if you have questions, hopefully your primary care provider, that's my 2 cents there.
Thank you. So Dr. Masci, please, can you
yeah, well,
shed some light
agree.
on this?
I think, it's hard to remember that 20 years ago, we didn't really have the internet. And I think the amount of misleading information that's available at our fingertips is very, very bad right now. And I think I would agree that if you're going to be using your computer or your phone to get information, well, go to the CDC website, go to the WHO website. There's plenty of legitimate information that you can, bypass all the stuff that's purely opinion driven on the internet. And people, if you go to Twitter, for example, you'll see respectable people who are respectable for something else completely, like they're actors or actresses, and they have firm opinions about medical issues. And that's just not a way to understand what's going on around us. We should be grateful that we have internet resources like CDC and WHO. And just to give you an example, right before this call, I was on a call with some of the other researchers at the Health and Hospitals Corporation. There is a question right now: how long does someone who's been infected with COVID remain test positive for COVID? Are they still infectious if their test is positive, say a month later? The answer to that is no. And the answer to that is clear in the CDC website. Yet it's confusing even to medical people to try to figure it out without looking for the answer. So I think we have to be sophisticated about Facebook, about the internet in toto, because it is very easy to get misled. Very, very easy. Lots of people are home now, spending more time than ever on the internet, and it's a problem. I don't know that there's an effective, powerful counterbalance at this point. I know that there isn't, but thank goodness that there are legitimate resources on the internet. I just wouldn't go with what individuals are saying.
Thank you so much, Dr. Masci. So this question is for our legal counsel, Mr. Bearak. A lot of people have lost their jobs as a result of this pandemic. We all know that businesses have shut down and the economy has nosedived, but there are financial resources available to keep people afloat. Can you please give us a recap of some of the things that people need to know to navigate through the system, especially as it concerns the financial entitlements that are available through the government, stimulus checks and all of that? A lot of people still have questions. Can you please help us to make sense of it all?
Yeah, the first thing I want to really emphasize on that is working with your local elected officials. For example, when the PPP program came out and people were having problems, business owners were having problems finding a bank, getting a bank to process their applications. And we read about the craziness involved with that. Perhaps if you weren't a customer of the bank, or you didn't have a high you weren't doing business with them at a certain, let's say $1 million or above level, they weren't necessarily helping you. And members of Congress, for example, would have been clamoring for the opportunity to hammer those banks and intervene for those for those constituents who reached out to them. I remember a particular conference I was on, conference call I was on with Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, where she emphasized that point. So I think it's important really to know that you have local advocates in your community for whatever your needs are, whether it's at the federal, state, or city levels. And often they have relationships, or staff have relationships at the places where you need help. So it's important to know that, and they can be good resources. So I think that's the first thing always. And I think it's also important to, if you have those needs, apply for those programs. If you're business owners, for example, some of the chambers of commerce, Brooklyn and Queens, for example, where I work with both of them, are particularly good on that. Some of the Long Island groups that I know of, like Vision Long Island, that I'm close to, also have been, helpful in making the connections and helping to find folks who can help people access the resources they need. The bigger problem, though, is though there was, robust programs in the beginning, on the business side, it seems that there was still money left on the table for whatever reason, and that perhaps a lot of business owners, I'm told, particularly business owners of color, did not access the programs, in the numbers where they could have. And it seems sometimes there's an outreach issue there. And to me, it's always a shame when people perhaps are not connected to government. Maybe you're a newer American, an immigrant, and maybe you had a sense that the government you came from was perhaps not so helpful, that maybe was even a little corrupt. So it makes sense to, for those people in particular, and people who are aware of them, to help connect them to resources, because they just don't always know to do that. And some of the elected officials that I've worked with have made it a point of emphasis to try to, organize and connect business owners in that place. I'm also, really concerned about, the workers who are out of work, and, the employment programs are running out, and even with like the PPP program, there's a tax issue. So like, if you were, as you probably have read, you can convert the loan to a grant. You can apply to do that. But if you do that, you may have tax consequences that you had not anticipated. And if you don't have an accountant that you've worked with or other tax advisor, that can end up costing you tens of thousands of dollars if you have a lot of employees. So, because now you're no longer able to deduct as a business expense the salaries or the wages of those workers that you were bringing back on through that program. So it's really important to have access to all the right information. But I'm really concerned about the workers themselves, the fact that, in Washington, there is a deadlock on providing the aid that's absolutely necessary for people to get on. And something I learned when I was in government, particularly in terms of when you talked about when we were working on affordable housing, when I worked for the Bronx Borough President, when you build new housing in a community, it drives local retail also. That follows. And that's obviously, retail is a real entry level place for people to get jobs, for example. And that helps drive the economy. So there's this whole, reverse domino effect if we don't, get people back to work and are purchasing. The wealthy people don't do a lot of the purchasing that, drives the economy. It's middle to lower wage people that are doing most of that kind of purchasing. It drives the retail industry, food industry, the smaller restaurants and the like, and that also employ a lot of people. So, and that really drives the economy nationally. And one of the things, I work with a couple of transit unions that represent MTA workers, and there's a big hole right now in the MTA budget that they're looking for the federal government to fill. And the reality is about 40% of all the mass transit in the nation is based in the New York City metropolitan area, between the subways, the buses, and Metro North and Long Island Railroad. And the economy of New York City, or greater New York City area, really drives the whole economy of the nation. And when you fail New York City, for example, in New York State, by not passing the needed additional stimuluses and worker protections, you're really, essentially killing the economy of the whole nation. And the fact, and that's a real problem. And I don't want to get, bring politics into this too much, but it's important, that's not politics, that's just really facts. And I think it's really important to understand the data and what the implications are. And as people stay out of work longer and they're not buying things, it puts more of a strain on public services. And now and who's paying for those public services? Those of us who are employed, maybe those of us who aren't employed, who are seniors, perhaps, who are not paying those taxes out of perhaps their pension and retirement funds. So it really is a big problem. But again, my point of emphasis is for those people who need help, whether they're a business owner, whether they're an individual worker, if things aren't working out, it's really, I think the first place is really always to start with their local elected officials. Most of them have really good staff. I had run an office for an elected official for a decent part of my career, and we had competent people, professionals, and it was a point of emphasis to serve people. And, you know, I view, you know, folks in public service when they have to serve members of the public the same way you have to serve somebody if you're, you know, if you're trying to build a business, you have to take care of the people, your clients, and the constituents in those ways are the clients, and they drive that. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much for that detailed information, Mr. Bearak. Dr. Izuchukwu, let's pivot this discussion to the continent of Africa. You are the CEO of Core Devices, and you're an inventor of medical devices. You have produced and patented various medical equipment that actually save lives, including a unique portable ventilator that can be used efficiently and cheaply in African countries and anywhere in the world for that matter. But let's bring this discussion back to the nation of Africa. What kind of advice would you give to the government, the people, the medical personnel to help them be ready for this pandemic and keep them ahead of the curve?
I think first thing is first, it is no new news that Africa is in short medical supplies. Okay? We have a shortage of medical supplies in Africa. It's been written and investigated by the World Health Organization. But Africa is poor. When I say is a country where you don't really have that much going on for the middle class, right? You're either poor or you're rich. And access to healthcare is problematic, as you very well know. So for some time to come, I think the solution is exactly what you guys are doing. We have to find a way of helping the masses. To help the masses, we have to make sure that they have adequate medical supplies. On my part, my role is to contribute to the journey in the medical device arena. As I stated, I have designed and developed medical devices over the years. Most recently, I am teaming up with the University of Jos to deliver for manufacture a portable ventilator, the first of many that will follow. After that, we're going to embark on next generation. We will also be developing oxygen equipment that actually generate oxygen from air using what is called technically pressure swing absorption. And the list goes on for what my vision is. But I think that medical devices are in short supply in Africa, not only for COVID-19 issues, but also issues beyond COVID-19. And with the steep background I have and the years I've spent in the medical device arena, I believe I have a lot to contribute. As Dr. Onuorah was saying, ask not what your country will do for you, but what you will do for your country. I believe that I have a lot to contribute, and there's no better place to give back than my own dear continent. The devices that I've developed have helped a lot of people here and helped a lot of life-saving situations in America. I need to bring back that knowledge to Africa and also help the generations that follow, make them interested in developing medical devices to do the same thing, developing hopefully indigenous medical devices made in Africa will be much cheaper than imported from America, as you know, right? So we have talents there, but aside from theory, they have no practical experience. You should see the smiles on these guys' faces when we have conference calls during the week. The students are so excited because it's the first time that somebody is bringing home a practical experience for them so they can relate to what I'm talking about, not only in textbook form, but in practical form. We have a prototype right now. I envision that within the next month or so, we'll be ready to show and tell.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Izuchukwu. This question is for Mr. Bearak. Mr. Bearak, how has the incidence of the coronavirus affected the immigration policies in America? pre-coronavirus or pre-pandemic, the immigration department, as we all know, was on a roll, rounding up and deporting illegal immigrants. It appeared that the coronavirus has put a halt to that. At least it has slowed it down. So what is the future prospects for immigrants who are hoping to legalize? Will the pandemic help them or will it hurt them?
Well, you're really giving me more or less a political question to answer. It really depends who's in charge in Washington at the end of the day. We know the rhetoric that's coming out of the campaign and where it's coming from, and where certain folks have been using that in a way that I think is not good and frankly is reprehensible. And, you know, that's it, you know, that's the basic answer, you know, in a nutshell. But there are different resources from different immigration groups. Somebody needs to mute their phone, and they can be particularly helpful in that regard. Some of the members of Congress have made immigration policy an important place, particularly Congressmember Grace Meng, who represents Northern Queens in particular. So staff on her, you know, from a policy standpoint, staff at her in her office would be good people to work with, I think. But, you know, you're really asking me a tough political question. Obviously, there are stances that certain urban areas, for example, New York City has taken that have been pro-immigrant, and that forces are there in that regard. I think in the labor movement that obviously I work with, it's pro-immigrant and New American, and they understand that. I think the separate issue there, I think it was also driven well by the musical Hamilton that maybe a lot of people haven't seen because it's not easy to get tickets for, you know, but you can always now do it on Disney, is the sense that America started out as a place where, even though the initial leaders were all relatively new Americans, and many of them were actually immigrants not too much before the revolution. And when you think about public policy issues, and I always raise this particularly with Social Security as one of my favorite examples, is that many people who are immigrants who never naturalize, and maybe because of the workplace issues, there's sort of like numbers are created for them and stuff, so they never really are formally in the system, are paying into Social Security, for example. And that is actually helping to pay for that system. And no one really talks about that when we're always told that the system is going to run out of money, which has always been one of the biggest lies out there since I've been in public service, and probably before I was in public service. So the reality is, I think immigrants have been proven to be a boon for the economy, and not just at the entry-level jobs when you see them in hospitality and places like that, but in fact, frankly, there's professionals who come in and have made a difference in intellectual property and computers, in medicine, and the like. Not that we always want to steal doctors from other countries that have a need, for example, and nurses, but the reality is the United States is benefiting from the presence of these people, and it needs to be really talked about more. And I don't think it gets enough attention, so that people have the sense it's just about people stealing, the concept of people stealing jobs. And when people are out of work, especially from manufacturing kind of jobs, some of the wage jobs, they're susceptible to people talking about that, which is wrong. And that's why it's become a wedge issue in 2016, and could be a wedge issue in this campaign, except there's some other issues raised as well. But I think it's really important for everybody to understand what the real truth is and for that to be spoken about. But, you know, whether it would be a pandemic like we're facing now and what is said, especially when certain people in public office refer to it as the China flu, for example, that's just horrible. And it sets the wrong tone. And that's my biggest fear when you talk about that, because that, whether it's a pandemic, if there wasn't that, they would probably try to blame the forest fires out in the West on immigrants if they could, because when there's something bad, I mean, you know, I'm Jewish, and, you know, if you think about how Jews became, you know, in Germany between the wars, you know, blamed for a lot of things that were not anything that you can really rightly attribute to them. But it was easy to do that when people are looking for a scapegoat. And you see that even again, where some people talk about, you know, the globalists and things like that. Often they're attacking people who happen to be Jewish, but happen to have, you know, left or liberal social or economic views. And therefore, because those people are Jewish, a Jew who is right-wing could be threatened just as much as that left-wing Jew, if you will. And the right-wing Jew may not realize that. You know, the concept of, you know, waiting for, you know, looking the other way, why somebody you don't agree with gets discriminated against, gets attacked, is just wrong. And I think what you're talking about really is that it's just, whether it's immigrants, whether it's poor folks, whether it's folks of color, it's just wrong to blame others for things that is not something that is their fault. And often they're victims of the same situation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bearak. This next question is for Dr. Izuchukwu. And we know that a lot of businesses have collapsed and people have lost their jobs, their livelihoods. But in the midst of this whole confusion, a lot of success stories have also emerged. For instance, there are people who have positioned themselves to create unique things to help people in the pandemic and other areas, and they have managed to create wealth even in the midst of this chaos. As the president of Core Devices, that's a multinational company that manufactures and markets all kinds of medical devices, among your many other accomplishments. You're obviously a savvy businessman. So what advice would you give people who want to start afresh, start a business or move forward financially during this period?
I have to say that every situation creates an opportunity. So to speak, the pandemic has created an opportunity or amplified the need for medical devices, in particular ventilators. As the lady before me was talking about with respect to nutrition, there's also amplified attention to nutrition, right? The advice I would give anybody right now, if you're starting a business, to think about what is needed at the moment. It is not important to think about 10 years from now, but now, this particular moment. There's a market entry point. You enter the market when the adoption curve is appropriate, okay? A lot of, just like we're able to communicate now via Zoom and all manners of communication via the internet. Before now, people were comfortable just going to their offices to work, right? Corporations soon realized that, hey, it's okay to let people work from their home, right? You don't have to go in. It also saves corporations a lot of money, right? But make your skills such that it is of demand, that you're actually solving a problem good for the moment. Start now to think about what the gaps are in light of the current situation. So companies that have allowed us to come together as a group via the internet using this social forum, social engendering technologies such as the one we are on right now, are making money like crazy, right? Zoom and the rest of them. I am applying my skills to helping, seeing the opportunity. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades. I have 19 patents after my name. To give back to my country, something that I know how to do very well. Design medical devices, from oxygen generation equipment, and also help next generation students, and people are rising, becoming interested in the sciences, all right? I knew as a young boy growing up in Africa, my passion was always the science. I wanted to know why things are, and not only why things are, whether I can replicate what I was reading in textbooks. And I was able to do that in America. I successfully did that. Ran research and development for Johnson & Johnson, ran it for Mallinckrodt, now Covidian, now Medtronic. I led a group of engineers, over 2,000 engineers located worldwide, some in France, some in Germany, some in England, and all whatnot. Out this poor guy from Nigeria, right? And we invented a lot of interesting things, right? And so I want to give back. My opportunity is to apply my knowledge to solve clinical problems that have already been solved and those yet to be solved in Africa. Okay, so the journey is before us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Izuchukwu. Mr. Bearak, I have 2 quick questions for you. I'm talking about working from home and all of that. A lot of businesses are reopening. Because of the pandemic, everybody has been working from home. But lately, a lot of businesses are reopening and people are required to go back to work. But a lot of people are afraid to return out there, to go out there and become exposed again. Legally, is there anything that employees could do to slow down the trajectory of their return to work without jeopardizing their job? Also, the second question is, can an employee sue their employer for contracting the coronavirus at the job? Especially, we have to bear in mind now that with this pandemic, there is no way of proving where a person got exposed to this virus.
Well, I start out by saying I'm not a labor and employment attorney.
Okay.
Though I know and work with some of them on both sides of the issue. And so these workplace issues have been talked with a lot. The first thing is, it's very possible some employers will ask people and maybe even ask visitors to their workplaces to sign waivers. And even if you sign that, it might be something that will make somebody who's not too knowledgeable maybe not go after that workplace owner, or whether it's the building or whether it's actually a firm. It may discourage them from doing it because they signed that paper, but I don't think in all cases with the paper, and again, it's not my area of law, but from what the discussions I've had, it is not something where people are likely to succeed in barring a suit from somebody who got infected as such. But there are other issues too. There are issues about whether, do you feel safe going back to your office space? And people have that issue. I've heard, for example, just in terms of the issue with teachers, my wife, who's a school secretary, has told me she's heard of people getting approved by the Board of Ed not to have to return for conditions that I would think you would not be able to get a waiver on without going into detail. But it could be, like I have a bone spur. That's enough of a reason for them to pass on, unless just someone who's making that decision, making things rather quickly. But there are people. I have a friend who's an attorney who works for I guess the court system but not in the courts per se. And she has concerns going back to the office. And it turns out that she's actually in a union, and I told her to check with her union and the like, but it's not clear from the way she's describing something, and this is actually, essentially a New York State agency, that from at least my friend's description, it doesn't sound like they're taking the precautions in the workplace that you would think would be protective enough of personnel. In other words, our phone, from what I hear, you need to, disinfect phones, chairs, all sorts of common area spaces and the like. And it may be that some things are basic like that, they're expected to do themselves, like have, their own wipes and stuff in the place. And that's generally not been my understanding. That's something you may want to do as an additional protection in your workspace. For example, if others might be around and can inadvertently, touch a phone that's on your desk, grabbing that because the phone rings and that's the one that was closest or something like that. But I think there are real issues in that space. The other thing in terms of office space is why there are synergies where when you're working in the same place together. And I remember particularly when I was working at the City Hall office, when I worked in the Counsel, or when I was in the Borough President's office in the Bronx, in particular, the ability just to walk into somebody's office and start chatting up ideas, and there were certain synergies, and I particularly liked that ability. And part of my success sometimes was the informal interactions of getting people who I had no line control over, but by working with them, developing that relationship. And that may not be a relationship I can develop over Zoom. If I had a pre-existing relationship, could I foster that? Yeah, but the startup, without having the ability to meet at some point, mitigates against that. So I am concerned about that from a practical standpoint. But the other side is there will probably be less need for office space. You might have to still have a larger amount of square footage in terms of keeping workers separate and things like that. But I think overall there will probably be a decline in office space, and you'll see, just like happened in the Wall Street downtown area after 9/11, where a lot of places went from office to condo. You'll probably see that in the greater Midtown area as a result as well. And what that may also mean is with residential, as I was mentioning earlier, it'll drive retail, and you'll see a whole different sense of development. But that means you might have to have, from a public service point of view, that means you may need to talk about new school buildings over time if families are moving in. At the same time, you may be looking at different types of business uses, retail uses and the like coming in. So as well, a lot of different things may happen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bearak. My next question is for a medical expert, Dr. Masci, and it has to do with a lot of fears and anxieties that people have about different aspects of, getting exposed to this virus. A lot of them are hypotheses, some of them are facts, some of them are theories, but some of the question has to do with the lifespan of the virus outside of the body. For instance, let's say that an infected person on the street sneezes, and let's assume that they're not wearing a mask and the virus escapes along with the droplets, and someone nearby walks near them. Maybe the person is not within their distance, that 6 feet distance. They say that the droplets, it does not stay in the air for too long. It drops to the ground. One question, if the person passes by, is it possible for it to remain in the air and for the person to inhale it? And another question is, when the droplets drop to the ground and somebody walks by and it gets on their shoes, do you take off your shoes when you get home? I mean, how do you deal with that? Can you actually track the virus into your home when you step on droplets that contain the virus?
Yeah, I think that part of the question is easier. I wouldn't be at all worried about virus that's on the ground. It won't last for very long, and if it gets on your clothing, you know, I really wouldn't worry about that. The sneezing without a mask, there are two types of particles that they talk about with this virus, droplet, as you said, and airborne. Droplets fall to the ground. Gravity takes them down. Once they're on the ground, that's the end of it. Airborne, though, they can travel 7, 8, 9 feet. Whether they are easily communicable that way, we don't know. One advantage that we have at this point, even though we're only 5 or 6 months into this, we know that there have not been big outbreaks in common gathering places. You know, for example, in routine gathering places, I should say, not in the bars where people shouldn't be going, but the outbreaks that we're aware of have been within households, and that requires continued extended contact with someone. It is a transmissible infection, but there haven't been, let's say, a community-wide outbreak that seems to have been started by one individual who was sneezing. You know, it just doesn't seem to be like that. The virus doesn't seem to remain viable living on surfaces for very long at all. But I think we do all have to continue to wear masks. The major reason to wear a mask is to protect others, to keep droplets off of other people, to keep aerosols from reaching the 7, 8, 9 feet away from you. And they also have a role in protecting yourself. One of the really good news parts of all of this is how effective masks have been shown to be. They're about as effective as a vaccine is expected to be. So wear your mask and keep it on when you're outside. Make sure it covers your nose and your mouth, and you will be doing a lot to protect yourself and to protect other people.
Thank you so much. So the next thing has to do with quarantine. Not necessarily quarantining of a person, but quarantining of objects. I'm sure that most of us in the audience have done it. When you buy something, you bring something, or you get something online, before you allow it to come into your house, of course, if it's something that's easily washed, you wash it down before you let it, leave in your house. However, there are some objects that are large, like electronic equipment. And for me, I know that I have a quarantine area for those things. When they come in, I bring them in with gloves, and then I leave it for a number of days before I start even opening it. Can you give us advice on this so that we'll know exactly how to approach this?
Yeah, I would never tell anybody not to take those sort of steps you're talking about, but I think it's pretty clear that there have not been wide-scale outbreaks that came through the mail. If you think of the postal carriers, the post office workers, the people who handle packages before they get to your door, there have not been outbreaks associated with that sort of job. Now, I'm sure many of those people take reasonable precautions, and I'm sure some of them don't. But as I said, I would never discourage anybody from taking a precaution. I don't think it accomplishes much. If you ask me what we do in our house, we don't do any of that. We don't take our shoes off. We don't wash packages that are delivered, because I know the virus does not last long on inanimate surfaces like that. And even if it is still there, it's not easily transmissible. This is a respiratory virus. So to get it off of a delivered box would not be easy. You'd have to assume that the virus is getting all over the place into the air, and it just doesn't behave that way. But I'll say it again, I would not criticize anybody for taking reasonable precautions. Just don't worry too much about that sort of thing.
Thank you so much. So another question for you, Dr. Masci. How do you account for a lot of areas where there has been lockdown? People have been indoors, they have not been mingling. For instance, the country of the Philippines, they are known for their very strict lockdown policies. Actually, people cannot go easily from state to state. People cannot even go outside in the supermarket to shop without some kind of identity card and all kinds of things. Yet, the virus seems to be accelerating in those places. There are people who have not been, like they have been home, they've not been exposed to this virus the way that we think about it, and yet they're getting infected. How do you explain that?
Well, I don't know exactly what the circumstances are in Philippines for the last couple of weeks. I think all of the East Asian countries, including the Philippines, are far better than what we're seeing here in terms of transmission. But, you know, even here, even in our own hospital, we see people coming in with COVID who were really very meticulous about observing these precautions. And, you know, is it possible that there are exposures that the person themselves is not aware of? I don't know. I would have to look closely at what's going on in the Philippines to have a better answer to that. But if you look at Japan, South Korea, the East Asian countries, not the South Asian countries, but the East Asian countries, they're all doing really quite well with transmission of this. It's the South Asian countries, particularly India, as everybody knows, that is having a huge problem with it. What exactly those differences represent, we don't fully understand yet. We think obviously it has something to do with crowding, with inadequacy of testing, et cetera. But giving you a long answer because I don't know the latest on Philippines. I'll have to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Masci, and thank you again to all of our panel members. It's been so enlightening. Dr. George Onuorah, I'm going to hand over to you to give us some final words before we turn over the floor to the audience members that have questions. Anybody that have questions, there has to be a protocol on how to ask your question, whether you want to raise your hand. I think there's something you click to show that you want to, you know, speak. So Dr. George, can you do that for us?
Okay, so it's appreciation from me for us gathering today, and then for all our speakers, Dr. Masci, Dr. Izuchukwu, Corey Bearak, a good friend of mine, Miss Melissa Lynch, Dr. Izuchukwu, of course. So, but in the interim, you know, because we are running short of time, I know that Heidi Sucking might have a question. And so let's just move forward, and the next time we can, you know, see how we can accommodate my thoughts and pronouncements. So it's a pleasure to have everyone. Thank you.
Dr. George, I might jump in. If anybody needs to leave, I appreciate you joining us, but I know you all have tight schedules. We're going to continue this call a little longer. We will have more of these in the future, and please stay in touch with us if you'd like to join us. But if you have to go, I understand, and thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you, Rob. So Heidi, do you have a question there? No? Sandy? Any question?
It looks like we were very in depth with this. So.
It's coughing, allergy season, and construction work. I saw it also. My concern is people like me who I didn't go for the testing early on, and because I spoke to my doctor's nurse practitioner, she was busy, my nurse at Mount Sinai. In all likelihood, I did test late June and tested negative for both the coronavirus and the plasma. I'd like to know, and my doctor is still uncertain, I do have some issues at the present time. Can we get it for the second time? I'm trying to do everything I can to prevent it, but I've had 2 or 3 friends who were in Europe in 2019, and they think they had it there in fall, late winter. And I know one friend that brought it back, unfortunately, from Germany, not knowing she had it. And is it possible that she's worried that she can get it again? There have been some surges in Europe, and I would like, if possible, an answer to all of that. Thank you.
Is that Dr. Masci?
Yeah, I can try to answer that, and then I have to get off, unfortunately. There's only been 1 case in the world so far of proven someone getting it twice. Only 1 case in the world. So the standard approach to this is we don't retest people within 90 days. If they've been infected, we don't keep retesting them because they continue to have a positive test for 90 days. Now, that 1 case was just reported 2 weeks ago from China. We're all keeping an eye on that, and we have to be conscious that there may be potential for reinfection. In that 1 case, it was a slightly different version of the virus. So getting infected with the same COVID-19 has not yet been reported. But it's sensible to think that it might be possible. I don't think that there have been confirmed cases anywhere in Europe at this point, and I think there hasn't been any confirmation of that yet. I'm going to have to get off now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Masci.
Obina.
Yes, okay, so it looks like everybody has asked all the questions that they have. So I just want to say it's been very enlightening speaking to our panel of experts, Dr. Masci, who just left, Dr. Izuchukwu, Ms. Lynch, and Mr. Bearak. I just want to thank you all so very much for your contribution. I also wish to thank our audience members for their questions. Ms. Herka, thank you so much for your question. Again, let us just continue to stay vigilant, take care of ourselves, make sure that we, whenever we go out, protect yourself, do whatever you can, and we're all going to be fine. Again, my name is Chinyere Obina Onwuchekwa, and I'm the author of the book series, Dictates of the Heart, and I'm the executive director of the television show, cable TV show, Africa on the Rise. And I just want to say thank you all so very much for your time, and continue to stay safe. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinyere. I appreciate you walking us through there. Like I said, everyone, if you'd like to join us in the future, please follow us. You can see this rebroadcasted on Facebook at FSCDI.org on Facebook or our website. And stay in touch. I think these are really great discussions. I learn a lot, and I appreciate everyone contributing. So be safe and enjoy
Thank
your week.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.